and being part of the press conference. Yesterday was the trade deadline, as everybody knows, in the NBA. A lot of activity, a lot of big stuff, a lot of small stuff. A couple of deals, in the last week or two. But I thought it was a pretty active, 3 or 4 hours in the morning yesterday. So as you know, we did make a deal yesterday. We traded Ish Smith and Vern Carey and future second for Montrezl Harrell. Okay, and what I'd like to say is first is to thank Ish and to thank Vern, developing player, very young, and that's one area that we do have a lot of duplication. But I want to thank him for his 2 years and wish him well, as well. And they're both in Washington, D.C. We hope to have the trade, fully completed today in terms of contingencies, which is basically physicals. So the team is in Detroit, and if we get the physicals completed on both sides, which we expect to do, Montrezl will play tonight, or at least be available to play. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions. If anybody has any, I'm sure you do.
We'll start with Sam Perley.
Hey, Mitch, thanks for joining us. Just kind of starting off with, what do you like most about Harrell's game? What stands out to you when he plays, and what do you think, or why do you think he's going to be a good addition to this Hornets front court unit?
Well, I think it's obvious, if you watch him play, he plays with a great deal of energy and passion. That goes a long way on the court, in the locker room. We do have a bunch of young players, a couple of older players, but he does play with a great deal of energy and passion. So that's going to be, something very welcome to this group. One of the elite finishers, in the NBA, very good rebounder, in particular, very good offensive rebounder. So, those are, things that, we felt, we needed. As you know, we're going through a little bit of an injury segment here in our season. And, we felt to add a player that can come in right away and play, as we don't know how long some of these players are going to be out for, would give us, a boost, hopefully in the next week, give our guys a chance to heal and, hopefully help us win some games. Originally, at the beginning of the season, we talked about, one of the goals, which I felt we were a little bit ahead of ourselves, which was to get into the playoffs, right? And, that still remains, one of our goals. So I think we could have just, stayed pat. But, with the injury situation, our schedule is favorable in terms of home games, but they're all really, really good teams. So I also think this will give us a little boost and hopefully push us a little bit towards, a goal that we had at the beginning of the season.
Thank you.
Steve Reed.
Hey, Mitch, Steve Reed from the AP. Hope you're doing well. Where do you see him playing in terms of position-wise? I know he's kind of a power forward center, but where do you kind of see him playing, and where do you see him maybe in the rotation as well?
Yeah, it's probably more of a question for our coach, but I think you've nailed it. He's a 4'5", a little bit undersized, but he makes up for it with his length, and his passion and his energy. So we do see him playing, the 4-5, probably more 5, in today's game, right? Setting a high pick and rolling to the basket. Now he's at the basket, for a lob or offensive rebounds, finishing plays. So I would guess primarily he's going to get most of his minutes, at the 5. And, that can push down the roster, and, Miles Bridges has played some, small ball 5, so maybe there'll be some minutes, Miles can go play 3 now a little bit since, Gordon's injured. So, the coach is going to have to manage it, but primarily he would get most of his minutes at the 5 position.
Christianati.
Mitch, good morning. How many calls did you field about other players on the roster, and how many of them were about PJ Washington?
Well, one of the things about the trade deadline, you do get a feel for how the players on your team are valued, because everybody calls and says, who do you like on my team? Who do you like on your team? And that's how conversations start. All of our young players, there was a lot of interest. It was, really eye-popping to me, some of the interest in some of our players, and some of them because they're young, some of them because they've been productive, some of them because maybe they don't get paid a lot, right? So, there's a lot of factors. I'd like to believe it's because they're all promising, young players. And our older players, of course, there's interest. It's a little bit different, when you're looking at big pieces. But there was a lot of interest, in our young players. As far as how much interest in PJ, I would not share that.
Rod Boone.
Hey, Mitch, just wondering, you mentioned just the trades itself and just how active it was. Were there any deals out there, I guess, that maybe you were contemplating doing? Was there a couple out there maybe you were trying to figure out if they were good enough for the team? And what about just the trades overall for you, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, going into the trade deadline, prior to the last 6 games, right, we were very, happy with our group, and we still are. But then we had some injuries, which of course is no excuse, right? Everybody in the league's got injuries. We liked our group and we still like our group, but, we know we're going to have players out for a while now, and we're, at that, win as many as you lose. So we still are in a good position, to try to move forward, get into the playoffs, right? So keeping all that in mind, we try to have some vision, for the future. We like our group. This summer we are going to have multiple free agents. We've got to be careful, not to bring on, salaries, not only because you might be bringing on somebody with a long-term deal that duplicates what you already have, that you hope to have come back in a month or two. But also it could muck up, your financial picture, beginning as soon as this summer. We've got a plan for other players that we like on our team that at some point, will be a free agent or will be eligible for an extension. So that was a big part of, our approach, to the trade deadline. We could have made a lot of deals. A lot of teams could have made a lot of deals, but we limited ourselves, to, maybe just taking a player that had, expiring contract. So in other words, it didn't really impact us going forward. And also find that player, that had that kind of contract that we thought can make a contribution, not only in the next, 4 or 5 weeks, but also for the remainder of the season. So that's the long and short of it. Ish, we had to give up Ish, who was a great backup point guard, great in the locker room. There was a cost to making the move. But that was really, our mindset going into it. Like I said, there was a lot of interest in our players, and we could have done a lot of different deals. Who knows if they would have been good or not, right? But we wanted to have some vision.
And you mentioned players, free agents. Obviously, Montrezl will be one of them. Does this give you a little bit of a chance to kind of, I guess, maybe take a little bit of a flyer on him, kind of look at him, I guess, up and close in person and see how he fits with your program if you want to bring him back to free agent after this season?
Yeah, well said, right? He is a free agent to be expiring contract. And typically, you expect those kinds of players to play really hard because they're looking for a contract. That's not really the case with him. I don't think it matters, okay? That's just the way he plays. So, the answer to your question is exactly like you stated it. Yes, definitely.
Jason Brown.
Thanks, Mike. Mitch, thank you again for the time. We appreciate it. You mentioned even Harrell's a little undersized, but it seems to me he would add an element to your team of interior offense as well as the defensive aspect as well, which, unless I'm not remembering correctly, is something that you wanted to improve in the offseason and tried to, obviously, with bringing in Mason Plumlee. Does he sort of add to just an extra added interior element, both on the offensive and defensive ends, that perhaps you are in need of right now?
Well, I mentioned earlier, right, he's one of the elite finishers in the league. And, that is an area that we need to address. Yes, he is a little undersized, but he's really long. And, there are players that even though, they're amongst the giants in the league, they figure out a way to finish. And he is one of them. We do get a good look at him, and during the summer, we'll have options and decisions that we have to make with free agents, and he'll be unrestricted, so he'll have options also, right? And I'm sure he is from North Carolina. I think he's from Tarboro, right? So, the first thing I said to him yesterday when I called to say welcome was I said, welcome home, right? And, we had a nice little conversation.
But I guess what I'm asking is, does he sort of add a presence there on the interior that it could be really helpful for your team during this playoff run?
Well, finishing, rebounding. We're not the best finishing team in the league. Right now we're not the best shooting, team in the league either. We've lost our touch here. Hopefully we'll get it back real soon. But yes, rebounding, offensive rebounding. He's a great offensive rebounder. He gives us toughness in the paint. We're not a very good defensive team, so, maybe, he can give us, some defensive presence. I think first and foremost, I think we know his game. I think you guys, everybody kind of knows what he can do, right? He's in the paint and he's, plays with energy. But, his passion, especially in this season, we're hoping that, he could bring that and maybe some of it rubs off right on some of the other guys and gets us through a tough stretch here.
Sam Farber.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Mitch, for the time. You mentioned the team's injuries recently, as well as the overall goal for the year being to make the playoffs. Was this something you were considering, or a similar type of move going into the trade deadline all along, or is this more to fill a need based off the recent slump as well as the recent injuries?
No, I don't think it was something that we decided we needed to do a month or two ago. We were at some point we were 6 games above 500, and then we got the injury bug, and we still don't have clarity on Cody and Jalen. Gordon's going to be out longer than both of them, and they've been out now for Jalen several weeks. Cody for a week, and Gordon got injured just recently, but he's going to be out. So in some ways, if you're going to have injuries, get it before the trade deadline, so maybe you can address it. And that was pretty much our mindset going into the trade deadline. We're not going to have these players back, and we're in a good position, to contend. And if we could, stay afloat, and then as the other players filter back to us, I don't know who will be first. Maybe Cody, then maybe Jalen. I think Gordon's going to be out longer than both of them. But when they filter back, and if we're still afloat, then maybe we can make a bigger push.
Mike Solarte.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, Mitch. As you talk about Montrezl and him coming in on an expiring contract, is there a certain, as a GM, I should say, are you looking at metrics and how he contributes down the stretch to think about bringing him back next year? And obviously, as you said, he'll have options. But I mean, are you looking at numbers? Are you looking at how he fits in with Coach Borrego's system? And what is a GM looking for when you have a guy on an expiring deal that you may want to try to bring back?
Well, in all the trade discussions, that we've had in the last couple, 3 weeks, our analytic people were in the room. Okay, with me, with us, Buzz and myself, they're just sitting right there and, they're very involved, in the process. Our coach, has a great feel, and then he's got his analytic people also. And then there's the part that you see with your eye, right? On the court, right? The simple metrics that everybody looks at, shooting percentages and stuff like that. Most of his damage is going to be, in the paint, right? We know that he's going to be a very effective rebounder. Some of the stuff that you look at the NBA today, shooting threes and going to the corner and, top of the arc, you're not going to see that with him. So that may not fit into, a typical metric-based basketball decision. And, I keep on mentioning energy and passion, right? That doesn't show up in, any kind of a number or formula. That's something that you can see and feel, and that does translate into something also. And hopefully, as I said, he can share that with the other teams. And, I'm looking forward to some of these guys playing together, that really play hard.